Here's a business where your customers are delivered to you by armed men. They legally cannot leave. They cannot complain to anyone who matters. They cannot take their business elsewhere. And the government pays you around $100 a day for each one. And here's the part that will break your brain. In most of these contracts, if your building is half empty, the government pays you anyway. Which means the single worst thing that can happen to your business is that crime goes down. It's a private prison. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how a company makes $24 of profit per human being per day, why a clause buried in most contracts means you get paid for empty beds, and why this might be the most disturbing business model on earth. Let's break down the economics of owning a prison. So, you want to own a prison? First, the thing that surprises most people, you can. In America, prisons are a private industry. Two companies dominate it, CoreCivic and the GEO Group, and they're not shadowy operations, they're publicly traded corporations. You can buy shares in them right now from your couch on your phone. GEO Group alone reported around $2.6 billion in revenue in 2025. CoreCivic manages roughly 65,000 beds across dozens of facilities. Together, they run more than half of America's private prison contracts. And the market is enormous. The United States has about 5% of the world's population and roughly a quarter of the world's prisoners. Around 2 million people are behind bars. Governments spend about $80 billion a year locking people up. So how do you get paid? This is where it becomes almost unbelievably simple. You don't sell anything. You don't advertise. You sign a contract with the government, and they pay you a daily rate for each person in your building. It's called a per diem, a per man day, and the government delivers the customers. Let's use real numbers from CoreCivic's own filings. In 2024, they collected about $102 per compensated man day. Their operating expenses were about $78, which leaves an operating income of roughly $24.57 per person per day, a 24% operating margin on human beings, paid for by taxpayers. Now multiply. Their average population was around 48,000 people. 48,000 times $24 every single day, forever. Do that math and you'll see why nobody in this industry is in a hurry for the system to improve. But that's just the surface. The real genius, and I use that word with discomfort, is hidden in the contracts. Because here's the obvious problem with this business. What if crime goes down? What if sentencing reform passes and fewer people go to prison? Your building empties and your revenue collapses. In any normal business, that's the risk you accept. This industry looked at that risk and said, no thanks, and they wrote their way out of it. It's called an occupancy guarantee, a lockup quota. The clause says, in effect, the government must keep this facility a certain percentage full or pay for the empty beds anyway. A review of 62 contracts found 65% contained one. The typical requirement ran from 80 to 100% occupancy. The most common threshold was 90%. Some states signed up for 95 to 100. Sit with that. A private company signed a deal where taxpayers are contractually obligated to either supply prisoners or pay for the empty space where prisoners should be. If your city gets safer, if fewer people commit crimes, if a judge shows mercy, the bill still arrives. You have built a business whose worst-case scenario is a better society. And it gets stranger. CoreCivic's own 2024 numbers show their average occupancy was only about 75%. 3/4 full, and they still cleared $24 a head per day. That's what a guaranteed floor does for you. So the revenue is engineered to be safe. Now, the other half of the equation, and this is where it gets ugly, because if your income per person is fixed by contract, there's only one lever left to increase profit: costs. And in this business, costs means the human beings in your building. Of that $78 of daily expense, the overwhelming majority is staff salaries, which means the two ways to widen your margin are fewer guards and cheaper everything else: food, medical care, rehabilitation, education. Every dollar you don't spend on the people inside lands in your operating income. That's not a conspiracy theory, it's arithmetic. When revenue is locked and costs are the only variable, the incentive points in exactly one direction and it points down. Then there's the labor. This is the part most people refuse to believe until they look it up. Prisoners work. In 2022, the average wage across all prison labor was about 86 cents an hour. In 7 states, prisoners are paid nothing at all. In California, incarcerated people have been sent to fight actual wildfires, risking their lives, for around $2 an hour, while the minimum wage outside is $7.25. And there's the ecosystem feeding on the edges. The phone calls home, run by outside contractors. The commissary, where a family pays a premium for instant coffee and soap. The average family spends around $13,000 a year supporting an incarcerated relative. Every layer of this system converts someone's worst day into someone else's revenue line. So if the business is this protected, why isn't everyone doing it? Because it has one weakness, and it isn't crime rates, it's politics. Your entire income depends on the government continuing to want you to exist. And governments change their minds. One administration signs an order to phase out federal private prison contracts and the stock collapses. The next reverses it and the stock triples. You are not running a company, you're running a bet on an election, which is why these companies don't just lobby, they lobby hard. CoreCivic spent nearly $2 million on federal lobbying in 2025. GEO Group spent about $1.4 million on issues including appropriations and immigration enforcement. When your revenue is a policy decision, buying access to policymakers isn't marketing, it's maintenance. And that explains the industry's most revealing pivot. When federal criminal contracts came under threat, these companies didn't shrink. They followed the demand. Immigration detention was never covered by those restrictions, so the business leaned into it. GEO's revenue is projected to climb toward roughly $3 billion in 2026 on the back of that shift. The building didn't change. The beds didn't change. Only the category of human being filling them changed. That's what it looks like when a company is loyal to a business model rather than a purpose. So, does owning a prison work? Financially, it works terrifyingly well. $24 per person per day, guaranteed floors, government-delivered customers, a captive market that cannot shop elsewhere, and near zero marketing spend. Hand this model to an investor with the names stripped out, and they'd call it one of the most defensible businesses in existence. Predictable revenue, no competition, contractually protected downside. And that is precisely the problem. Every other business on earth succeeds by making something better. A restaurant grows when the food improves. An airport grows when more people travel. This is the only business in the world that grows when things get worse. Its ideal customer is a person whose life just fell apart, and its ideal future is one where more lives do. So if you still want to own a prison, remember the one number that explains everything. $24.57. That's the operating profit per person per day, not per product. Per person. Somewhere out there, a spreadsheet has a cell in it, And that cell is a human being, and the number next to it went up this year. And everyone involved called that good news.